Hello, my name is Tolu Daramola, and this is the International Educator. IE is a platform for educators to ask and get answers to questions we might have. Each guest shares their professional story on how they got to where they are and where their next stop is. Then, I get to ask questions that any educator or professional can use to develop themselves. I got to interview one of my favorite people in the world. Andrew Torris is the Avenue's founding head of school for Shenzhen, China. I met Andrew 3 years ago in Santa Monica, California, where he interviewed me for my first international job. It was not until the middle of my contract when I realized that he is the type of director I aspire to be, a leader who allows teachers to thrive, expects them to do their jobs, and is easy to talk to, even when dramatic change is happening. Andrew's professional story and advice for international teachers is priceless. I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I did. Professional story.
So my professional story. Anyway, I come from a family of educators. My father was my high school principal. My mother was an educator. My dad and I, sort of went through things when I was in high school, and we both have emerged from that unhealed, scar-free, luckily. I started my college days thinking about a variety of things. I was in theater, I did art, I did a variety of classes, I just took general studies. Finally, after a couple of years of doing that and sort of having no path forward, I decided I would just go into education until I figured out what I would do when I grew up. And 1984, jumped in the middle of an education program. 2 years later, actually a year and a half later, emerged with a bachelor's degree in elementary education, and began teaching in 1986 in a little suburb outside of Portland, Oregon called Beaverton, and did elementary multi-age classrooms, multi-age non-graded, taught little primary kids all the way up through grade 5. Was a tech coordinator and facilitator. I did staff development, a variety of things during my early years in education. I was tapped to teach other teachers how to use technology. My first year teaching, I was teaching veteran teachers, and I was like a rookie, which was sort of a humbling experience. But anyway, after 9 years in the classroom, I became a management assistant principal at an elementary school, and then became a middle school assistant principal, which I did for 4 years, and then I became an elementary principal. And this is all in the same area of Oregon. After 14 years of being in the United States, working in schools in the Portland area, my wife Amanda decided that she wanted to go overseas and work overseas, and so we ended up going to Saudi Arabia, where I led a campus of about 350 kids in Yanbu, Saudi Arabia, Yanbu Al Sanaya, and was there 4 years, and then moved to Shanghai American School, where I was selected to be the elementary principal at Shanghai American School. And in the 9 years that I was at SAS, I was an elementary principal, a middle school principal, and then deputy head of school. I was deputy head of school 7 of those 9 years, so sort of a rapid jump of jobs there for 3 years in a row. Then after 9 years at SAS, I've come to Universal American School here in Dubai, where I'm completing my 4th year tomorrow. And I'm off to be the founding head of school at the Avenues the World School campus in Shenzhen, China, starting Saturday. No, not quite like that, but it's pretty close.
What skills have you developed to work with people in these different cultures?
Well, I first of all, I guess to preface, my paradigm for working with people around the world is that in the inside we're all people, and we all bleed red, and we love our families, and we wish to be happy, and we like to laugh, and we all basically seek joy in our life in some way, shape, or form, and look for some sort of peace to carry around with us. And I'm assuming that everybody else on the entire planet has that same sort of mindset. And you can get a long way with a smile and a friendly gesture and a handshake if appropriate. And I try to at least subtly get to know people and where they're from and where they come from and whether it be an angry father worried about his own kids or a mom who's wanting to celebrate a success. That if you know people, then that resonates even more. So, that being said, skills and getting to know other cultures, I don't know. I'm horrible with languages. I can barely speak English very well on some days, and I think it's a matter of seeking to relate to people and see from where they're coming from. And if you can get that perspective of that from them and try to understand their concerns, their mindset, their world view, then I think everything will work out in the end. So if you're working from the standpoint of understanding the Chinese culture, for instance, one I've been living in and now returning to, you have to understand that they come from a rich, deep historical perspective. And a lot of the actions and interactions that they have are deeply seated and hammered into them as small children from the very beginning. The whole idea that every child in China has a strong belief in education. Well, that's actually very true. But that's a cultural understanding that to move forward in your life, you must be a strong academic. And so families rely on that belief to help their family and to make their family safe, because education will provide comfort, it will provide consistency, it will provide safety for the family, and that will then be shared out amongst their own people. Okay, I get that. Here in the Middle East, there's a strong ethos around being connected to other people in your community, and there's that connection, or the wasta, the idea of wasta and connection is very rich, and so people will do anything for a friend in this part of the world, and they will literally lie. They will stand up, they will loan money, they will advocate in the strongest terms, if you can think of the strongest terms, and ultimately that's because there's this strong belief in community here, and certainly family is so tight here. So if you understand those perspectives and where people are coming from, what they're saying may be completely different than what they're really believing inside, or what they're saying may insinuate that foundation as they move that forward. And so I don't know, I just listen and learn and reflect, and when absolutely necessary, ask a really stupid question, and you get sometimes from those stupid questions the best answers in the world. That's I don't know if that's a skill or anything, but it's how I navigate cultures.
That's really awesome. I never have heard someone break down the different cultures, the Chinese culture, Middle East culture. What would you say the U.S. culture is like?
I have a hard time with that. I really do. There are so many different components of it, and there's so many different influences, and my little corner of the United States where I grew up, I think to some extent, I grew up in a small town, in a little rural small town, and I think everybody knew everybody. And my parents grew up in an even smaller town, 800 people, and everybody definitely knew everybody. My mom and dad knew each other when they were in high school, and all that kind of stuff. And there's a certain level of comfort and reliability that Americans have come to expect from people in their communities, and but it's not at such an intimate level that I have observed in other parts of the world. There's sort of a stand on your own, pull yourself up by your bootstraps sort of attitude amongst Americans that have sort of that is certainly hammered home to you as a child. This is the country where you can lift yourself up and take care of yourself, and that has resonated into a lot of independent thinkers and so on. In our schools, the public schools at least, there's a certain level of autonomy that's given to students more and more as they grow up into the education system. And while there's some expectation, depending on the school and the level, at the end of the day, whether you succeed or whether you do not succeed is up to you, and maybe some influence of your family, depending on your age. But once you're in high school, you're a junior and senior in high school, if you're not cutting it, there's very little that your parents can do about it. The school officials know that, and they basically are to the point where they just hold the individual student accountable to that. And I think that has an influence on that educational influence has an influence on our greater community. To say, you know what, if you want to be successful, it's up to you. If you don't want to be successful and you want to be a bum or a drug addict or an alcoholic or unemployed, it's up to you. And so then people end up pointing fingers at people, saying, well, it's their fault. That they're choosing to be homeless. They're choosing to be unemployed, when in fact they may have a mental illness or there may be some other contributing factors or whatever. And so, I don't know, there's components of the U.S. culture that are very confusing, and I know it's very confusing to people who come into America, and they're like, you have this, but then you have this. You're caring and you have all these social services, but then you hold people who are needing help completely accountable for their own behavior when they're not. These things don't make sense to us, So America's culture is very fragmented, and it's by nature a function of a country of immigrants, and at the same time, there's this sort of entrepreneurial spirit that makes it an amazing place at the same time. So, I don't know. I haven't lived in the United States for 17 years for any period of time. I kind of feel like a stranger in my own land. And sometimes I walk down streets in the United States and I go, these people are very strange. Why do they act this way? And they're my own, and I sound and look and act like them. So, whatever. It is what it is.
That's funny. Yeah. Thank you. Kind of changing gears, what is an amazing moment in your life that has really defined you?
I have a few. I think, not to be sappy, but, the birth of your children is a pretty significant experience. And not that I had a whole lot to do with it. I was just sort of there as a spectator. But that's, that's sort of, as a father, I reflect back on that and like, that the path of your life changes significantly at that moment. And sometimes as a parent, you look back on the days before you had children, and you think, that was really cool. But there's hardly a parent out there that wouldn't say, yeah, I wouldn't do that again. I was on a professional level, and I guess at a leadership level. The moment I decided to cancel the buses on May 1st, 2004 in Yanbu International School because of a terrorist attack, that momentary, this is when I'm like, I got a phone call from my school nurse saying that her husband, was working in one of the refineries, called her to say that there was a shooting going on at the refinery. And I'm like, a shooting? Okay, Kathy, thanks. And I thought to myself, I've got to stop the buses. And so I just called the transportation people and said, we're canceling the buses, we're not opening up the school. And within 2 minutes, I got a phone call from my my assistant principal, who was an early riser, and told me that he was at the school early, because he always showed up like hours early, and the school was being shot at and attacked. And I'm like, well, and I could hear the gunfire on the phone. And so I like, well, get inside there's a closet, a concrete closet with a huge door that was where the copy center was. And I was like, go in that closet and stay in there and don't come out until I call you. And then I walked out of my villa and through a little gate area, and I stood in front of the one exit from our compound and stopped all of the teachers who were leaving. And I sent Amanda to go run to tell everybody to stay in their villas. And I even stopped a bunch of people who were not even my employees. And I said, hey, there's some shootings going on in town. Don't go. Stay in here. Stay in. And so, anyway, that was a landmark day where, we were hiding in the bathroom listening to the machine gun fire outside of our villas, and people died, and it was a bad thing, a very, very bad. It was a terrorist attack. But that moment where you're kind of like, and just make the call. Now, that could have turned out to be really bad, by the way. It could have been completely unfounded, and I would have had to explain myself why would I cancel school for no reason, based on one phone call and a hint of a hunch. But it turned out to be, I saved lives, I think, by doing that. Because I could have had a bunch of kids on school buses when those people were running around shooting up this town. And that would have been a really bad thing.
How have you moved on from that?
Well, I it has made me lead my life in a more fearless way. I'm not scared to take risks as much as I used to. Because after it's all said and done, everything is pretty simple once you get shot at. So you just do stuff, and you take risks, and you're more entrepreneurial, and it opens up your mind, and it freed me to some extent to just be a little bit more of who I am today. I didn't count myself to be particularly like PTSD scarred or something like that, but it scared the heck out of us. That's for sure.
I think it would scare a lot of people.
Yeah.
And some people even go through, we don't get shot at, but we do have like closed doors or missed opportunities, and I would call that failure. A lot of people call themselves failures. How do you define failure, and what do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I mean, I don't think not accomplishing something is necessarily failure. Failure is not accomplishing something, not learning from it, and not moving on and figuring out how to correct that or to make a different change. Failure is, stepping away from an opportunity because you were afraid to do something. Some of the best things in our lives are the things that happen when we're scared to death or we're nervous or anxious about something. Because if it's really, really worth doing, then there's an element of inherent risk and not necessarily bodily or something, but it's like things could go wrong. It could fail. It could not work. And if epic failures happen where things just don't work, and like, well, okay, that didn't work. What did we learn from that? How do we move on? How do we fix it? How do we get people more on board? But if you really want to fail, do something wrong and then don't examine it. Don't think about it. Don't learn from it, and then do it again. That's failure. Keep doing things over and over again and expecting a different result. That's failure. But try taking a risk, not accomplishing the goal, and then saying, okay, we learned a lot from this. Next time I do something like this, I will, move on. It's like the Saudi event. after the Saudi event, I held a faculty meeting at a pool because that was the only place we could do it. We all lived in the same compound, and so we had a big pool area. And I called the management up and said, "Hey, I need to have a staff meeting. Can you guys set up 35 chairs for me around pool number 2?" And so they did. And so and I remember during that meeting, a couple of the people in the audience were taking my picture, and I'm like, "Can you guys stop? That's just right now. I just can't handle it."
Yeah. And
after the meeting, somebody came up to me and was like, we need to document that kind of stuff because it's important for us and it's important for the school. And I hate having my picture taken. It drives me crazy because people are always like, "Smile," and it just drives me nuts. And but every time I'm stepping in front of people now and there's a camera in front, I just like bite my tongue and do that. It's a little private moments. I hate the camera now so much, probably because my wife always has a camera phone in front of my face. But anyway, it's like that kind of thing because you don't realize the little impacts you have on people's lives.
Awesome. My last question: what podcasts do you listen to? And what books would you give to others?
I listen to the New York Times Daily almost every day. What I do in my drive to and from school. I listen to a sort of amusing political podcast called Pod Saves America. I really do like that. Right now I'm listening to Bulletproof Radio a lot because I'm kind of interested in this whole bulletproof concept that this guy has, but he has interesting guests that talk about maximizing your thought processes. The last one I listened to yesterday was how words change our minds. So the words we use specifically, like words like failure, enterprise, entrepreneur, it gives us a mindset that motivates us to do certain things. So I find that interesting. Books I recommend or share with people. I really like anything by Adam Grant right now. I really like that guy. The Originals is one that I really like that I share with people. I'm reading Sapiens right now and Homo Deus, which I think are both fantastic books. I'm a kind of guy that has like a stack of books next to my bed, and then if I have a spare moment and I'm sitting around and I'm a little bored, I either check Flipboard or I get in the middle of my Kindle books that I have and have a stack of those, and I just choose something and I just read it. I can pick up different books at different times and kind of sort of keep track of the thread of things and. I don't know. It's a lot better. I've never been a kind of guy that can sit and stare at a screen and watch a serial of some sort or binge watch. Occasionally when I'm at home and I'm sort of in the mood, I'll binge watch something, but I can't sit in front of a screen and just watch a show. So I like, what are you reading? Well, that's hard to answer. Which one do you? Which particular area? Education? I've got that. Science fiction, I've got that. Ready Player One, I'm almost done with that one. It's just like you name it. I sort of have it always in reading it. So when people say, "Oh, I've got that," I love. Hey, I'm reading this book. I note it, or I get right in the middle of the Amazon store right away, and I just download it to my phone so I don't forget about it. And
if you would like to get more information,
all right. So I have $400 or $500 worth of books sitting there unread.
Check out.
I'll read them eventually. I'll get to them.
If you like to hear and want to hear more interactive educational stories and advice, like and subscribe. Thank you for listening, and see you next Tuesday.
Good luck with your project. This is like fun.